Let us join together in prayer. Infinite Spirit of the universe, manifesting love and tenderness from fragile flower to the mightiest oak, ever expressing infinite care and wisdom, creating a desire for a more complete understanding of life's obligations and opportunities. Let us attune ourselves to you, knowing that from this contact comes a more perfect understanding of the laws which govern our being, a more perfect comprehension of our duties, and greater courage to face our daily lives. Teach us to learn more of that great power of your Spirit to which we journey, more of its nature, its illuminations, its glories. May we discover more and more avenues of communications between the two worlds and attain a higher, a truer, a deeper appreciation of the truths of spiritualism. May we continue to grow in knowledge and wisdom, and through our healing and evidential mediums, reach humanity everywhere, bringing into their lives this great truth which has been brought into our lives, giving us a sense of joy, peace, and understanding. Amen. Hello everyone. I'm recording this on Mother's Day, and traditionally in our church we would celebrate Mothering Sunday by giving thanks to all those mothers within our congregation and indeed those within our families, both in this world and the next. As spiritualists, we know that when we pass on, we do not die because we simply move into a new stage of existence, still very much living and loving just as we did before. So our service is very much a joyous occasion, celebrating the meaning of family. Of course, for many, that role of mother is often played by others in our lives, and they too are celebrated in our service. But this year, things are very different. Due to the coronavirus, our church congregation isn't meeting, and we've all been asked to socially distance ourselves from each other, which means not visiting our mothers for fear of spreading the virus. Many of us are therefore finding different ways of communicating with our mothers today, whether it be by phone or other means of electronic communications like Skype or FaceTime, just to make that all-important contact on this special day. So this Sunday is a little strange for most of us, where our routines have been changed and our natural instincts are disturbed. As spiritualists, we know that the universal spirit that we call Father and Mother God is there to protect, to nurture and to care for us like a mother should. And we are reminded of that reality on Mothering Sunday. I remember talking with a colleague of mine some years ago and asking her how she coped with managing a young family and keeping down a responsible job at the same time. And she simply replied to me by saying, "John, you don't cope. You just learn to carry on and get on with it." And I guess that in the midst of sleepless nights and exhaustion, that's maybe the best you could hope for. But that was an important lesson for me. Sometimes you just have to get on with it. Women also tell me when they become a mother for the first time, they experience a sense of love that they've never known before. And I guess that alone helps you carry on. Becoming a mother or parent changes our lives. And constantly in the news we're being told about how we live in unparalleled times, and that when we are eventually through this crisis, life as we know it will change. Now that's scary for most of us to take on board, even though perhaps it's a wee bit melodramatic. As spiritualists, we talk a lot about embracing change and how progressive it is. After all, change is inevitable in all of our lives. But actually, most of us like the routine of everyday life. And I don't know about some of you, but the idea of working from home and socially distancing myself will take some getting used to. Our principle of the brotherhood of man teaches us that all men and women are connected, which is, of course, counterintuitive to being socially isolated. But our spirits are essentially intertwined, and as spiritualists we must find new ways of communicating, and maybe and hopefully our online forums will go a long way to achieving that. The aim of spiritualism is to effect a complete at-one-ment with and unison of man with God, till every action and thought of man is in perfect harmony with the divine will. Now that's the aim of spiritualism. So now, more than ever, we need to employ that philosophy of spiritualism in our lives as outlined in our 7 principles. And in so doing, that will make us richer in body, mind and spirit. And maybe, just maybe, this time of change that we're going through will allow us to take stock and pause in a moment of reflection to look at ourselves, our families, our colleagues, and see how we can truly change for the better. Now, more than ever, spiritualists need to step up to the mark and show how we can support our wider communities. I'm heartened to hear of how our local communities have started to communicate with neighbours, talking about setting up WhatsApp groups and new ways of communicating, saying, if you need anything, just let me know, we are here. Now, what a great message that is, and one that spiritualists need to be involved in, showing that we care. In these challenging and changing times, not knowing when we'll return to normality, we will all need to connect with that creative power that we call God to give us that all-important strength and guidance. I hope that in the coming weeks and months we can share our thoughts and ideas with each other in a virtual way, which might just see the beginning of a new way that spiritualists will communicate in the future. Who knows? In our Scottish Parliament last week, we had politicians saying that now was a time to put aside party politics and work for the common good of our people. Wow, what a shift in position. And indeed, I think only good could come from that, from collectively working to find a solution to our problems. Now, we know mistakes will be made, but let us all pull together and do our best to take on board the advice that we are given and protect ourselves and our families and our friends and our neighbours the best way we can. In such challenging times, let's pray that God and Spirit will guide our leaders to make the right choices in helping protect us from this emerging crisis. Wherever you're listening to this, I hope that you can find ways to continue to explore spiritualism and hope that we at Edinburgh Spiritualists can help you on that journey. Keeping that link with Spirit and God is never more important than at times like this. And I just thought I would like to finish this short talk by sharing with you a very short quote from the Lyceum Manual in a section called The Directing Mind. The great directing mind of all ordains, all are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul.
Hello everyone. I've had the privilege and pleasure to have been asked to share a few words with you. What a strange time that we're living in. I could sit here and give you a variety of different spiritual, perhaps, reasons of why we're here, and perhaps some form of spiritual encouragement. But I don't really want to do that, mainly because, one, we could have a discussion lasting many hours as to why this is taking place. Science tells us that we are experiencing a pandemic, but probably hasn't been seen since the outbreak of the Spanish flu epidemic 100 years ago. So this is pretty much a global experience where we can have a scientific rational explanation for it. The interesting thing about being human, though, is that we don't really do science very well, and rationality as a human experience tends to not necessarily always work. I will reference here the panic buying in the supermarkets and the obsession with buying toilet rolls of all things. There you go. Why would you do that when perhaps you would think of food first? But anyway, that's obviously people's personal choices. So human beings are not very rational when it comes to catastrophe. On the other side of the coin, and obviously I speak here as a spiritualist minister and a minister that leads a spiritual community back in Canada, the Inner Quest Foundation and the community there, and Inner Quest hosting the open door of the community there. And so perhaps it behoves me to give spiritual guidance and to find some kind of spiritual meaning to this. Well, we could look for a variety of different reasons and meanings. But to be quite honest with you, I feel I'd be giving you a disservice because there's 1,001 reasons and people sharing as to why this is happening. And to be honest with you, it's happening because a virus has crossed over and is finding new hosts, which is what viruses do. It's pretty much simple as that. Now, the spiritual reason behind that, we could sit here for hours and come up with a wonderful spiritual ideas that were either being tested, which I think is ludicrous, that this is a way where we can all find out of how we can look after one another and care for one another. But didn't we know all of that before this? So I can't understand why we would have to learn that one again. This is the planet's way of waking us up. It's not a very good way of waking us up, really, in my opinion anyway. So that's supposedly the level of spiritual discourse that we've got at the moment as regards this. Now, I'm really from the school of thought as to the idea of finding some kind of meaning is utterly meaningless, because you can find as many reasons and meanings to this as there are books or there are Facebook posts. And obviously you pay your money and you take your choice. I'm sharing an opinion just like everybody else. But to me, the real meaning of this is about being with people that you love, that you care about, and having the opportunity to look after them. At the moment, all around the world, there are healthcare workers and emergency workers battling and working so hard to keep the rest of us safe. And according to science, we have to follow the instructions to help them so that our own health systems don't get overwhelmed. That's, to me, a pretty big meaning. Now, for those of us enough who are fortunate to be able to perhaps get irritated about being held hostage in our own homes, then we have the time to explore the deeper meaning behind all of this. And for myself, the deeper meaning is that I'm lucky enough at the moment to be around people that I care about very much. I have the opportunity to look after them, care for them, and explain to them, often repeatedly, why we are having to do this. And I consider myself so fortunate to be able to do that. Now, strangely enough, and quite contrary to a lot of popular spiritual explanations, the whole universe is not centered around what I want or what I care about, which is a radical thought these days, isn't it? But the simplicity of all of this is that the age-old story, the age-old myth, the age-old reason holds true. We're all in this together. It's always been about all of us, not about I, but about we. We will come through this. We will survive. I really, really hope at the end of this that humankind seeks to do things better, that we begin to find out, after having been in isolation, that the only ones we have are the ones in our heart, whether we are isolated with them or whether they are on the other side of the world. At the moment, I'm in the UK. I should have been back home in Canada, but I know my family home in Canada are safe and I miss them very much. But I have my family here in the UK who I'm caring for, and I am so fortunate at this instance to be with them to be able to do that. And that for me is meaning enough. I could look for 1,001 meanings as to what this is all about. But ultimately, it's about being and knowing that you're there for one another. And at the end of this experience, we come out the other end to say, well, the only thing I learned was that people matter. Well, then we've not learned anything new. We've just remembered something that society has forgotten along the way. Look after yourselves. See the meaning in one another, because that's the most important thing. Be safe. Be loved.
It seems very strange to be giving philosophy online and through this means rather than standing on the platform. And for me, it's a time where over the next few weeks, I will need to change things. Already due to asthma, which I have had in the past, I now have to stay in for 12 weeks. And it's going to be very difficult. But even within that, I'm starting to think of some of the things that I can do, perhaps I've not been able to do. And maybe some of these interests I have in writing. And I remember for my birthday, I got a painting set from family. Has it even come out the box yet? Well, the answer is no. But I'm starting to think ahead, because it's that time where we really need to look a little bit forward. And perhaps, as well as looking after others, just look after ourselves a little bit more. One of the great things about spiritualism is that we know spirit is always with us in whatever shape or form. They are always there, helping us and guiding us. Sometimes when the going gets tough, it's sometimes a little bit difficult to remember that and to see that. but we know that they're always there. And through those moments of rain, there just always seems to be that little flicker of sunshine. And sometimes I find that there are days when we're trying to make sense of things. And then we suddenly watch something, read something, or listen to something, and suddenly it just seems to make that little bit of sense. And something I picked up the other week was this little book, and it was written in 1954, and it was by the Theosophical Publishing House. And I opened it, and I started flicking through it and thinking, oh, some of these words are really quite big. Should I actually start this and try and get through it? But I did. And just a few pages in, I came across a very lovely little poem. And it's by a woman called Norma de Brensency. And she said, "When winter touches me and I am standing all alone, within the heartbeats of my heart, I hear a deeper tone. And somehow I'm lifted up beyond my little self, to where dwells a richer I, enthroned in summer's wealth." And perhaps this is a time where we take care of others, and we will always have others in our thoughts, and we always do what we can to help them, to protect them. Because in many churches up and down the land, including in our own church, we have got to know many as friends, and they come together on a Sunday and other days. And I think of everyone that takes part, the members of the congregation, the mediums that come along, our healing group, our Monday circle, our Wednesday circle, all come together. And it is going to be a time where, for a while, those friendships, in a way, will have to be put on hold. So over the coming weeks, it's very much a time to think about friendships, to think about those that mean the most important to us. And within these glimmers of rain, to know that at some point, the sun will come out again. Summer will be here. Over the weeks to come, it is very important that we take care of others, as I've already said. And one of the great things I know that been done in the Centre and the Church is we know and we try and take care of everybody. So I also know that there is a chance for those that perhaps know someone quite vulnerable to put that name forward where we can give them a ring and give that little bit of a chat. Because sometimes that listening ear is very much all we need. And that's another great thing about coming together. When we come together in the church and the other events, we come together and everybody is that listening ear. The other great thing about Spirit is we know that Spirit always listens. They're always there and they can help us. And sometimes when that worry goes round and round and we're not quite sure what to do or what to do next, sometimes if we just sit there and we make that connection with Spirit in whatever way we can, we know that they'll listen. And sometimes we'll get those answers. And as I found today in simply opening this little book, 1954, all those years ago, that little poem just made that little bit of sense all these years later. So I hope over the next few days and the next few weeks that I am able to keep in touch with everybody as well, like so many people. The online world is a wonderful thing. We can keep those friendships going It might not be in the physical sense and meeting and laughing and being that listening ear in the groups. And we'll miss a lot about what happens. But I know that that day will come again when we're able to do that. And the churches and our church will all come back together and we will welcome each other as we did before. And it's one thing I absolutely know in my heart. So let's place that trust in Spirit. Let's place that trust in ourselves. Let's listen to Spirit. Let's rely on Spirit. And let Spirit help us through those difficult times ahead. Because I often say, they're there with us on the days it rains. They're there shouldering us. And they'll be there every step of the way.
Hello friends. I believe at a time like this that prayer is very important. Quite often prayer is the last resort for people when they've tried everything else. They come to prayer, a last-ditch attempt to try and change a situation. But that puts prayer at the bottom of a list of actions. And I'd like to suggest that prayer is something that could be the top of our list. But if it is going to be the top of our list, then perhaps we should think about it a little bit. Perhaps we should question what we think prayer is and what it can do. When I was growing up at school, we said prayers in assembly, and I'm sure many of you have said prayers in school or whichever church you found yourself in. But I hope you've always had an opportunity to put something of yourself into that prayer. I think when we pray and we read a prayer from the page, there's a danger that it becomes mechanical, something that we're just saying and reciting. But prayer is more than that. I remember asking at school, why do we hold our hands like this when we pray? And the answer that I was given was that it points towards God with our hands. And that gives you the sense that God is somewhere out there, somewhere external to us. And it wasn't until a long time later that I discovered that that actually, for me at least, wasn't the truth. Because for me, God isn't out there. God is in here. And that piece of understanding changed the way that I pray. Because if God isn't out there somewhere and is actually in here, then that changes the direction in which I send the prayers. I don't send them out into a vast universe to evaporate and disappear and be of no use to anyone. I send them within. And the reason that I do that is because I know that God is inside of me. That within me is that presence of the God force. And so when I pray, it is like a connection between my mind and the mind of God. It is placing my presence within the presence of God. And that is a wonderful thing to think about, because it reminds us that we are carrying around this potential to instantly communicate with God. And of course, if God is within us and prayers can be sent within us to God, there is no need for us to hold our hands like this, or to kneel, or to do something different. We can all pray where we are now. We can pray when we're at work. We can pray when we're with other people. We can pray when we're alone. It doesn't matter. As long as we send the prayer, it will be received. One of the most important things I believe that we should remember is that we don't even need to pray with words. And why do I say this? Because I believe that we should remove as many barriers as we can between ourselves and God. That's so important, because there are times in our lives when we can't find words to express how we feel. We can't find words to express what it is about what we're experiencing. It might be a new experience, it might be a new feeling, it might be a situation that we've never had to cope with before. And yet we still need to pray to find that connection and that strength and presence within that connection. So what do we do? Well, words, when they become a barrier, should be just swept aside. When words are no use, don't labour on the fact. Dispense with them. Because that presence of God that's within you now, that's been within you always, is aware of not only the words that you say, whether out loud or in your mind, but is also aware of the feelings that you feel, of the images within your mind, of the sensations within your body. And so with a prayer, which is a communication with God, you can share what you're holding in your body, which might be pain, which might be about healing. You can share a feeling that's within your mind or within your emotions, and it will be registered. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to justify yourself to God, because we know that God isn't judgmental. And therefore, it's just an act of opening ourselves up. And in that sense, we become the prayer. We become the communication with God. We simply allow our intention to be that we're going to be seen and felt and registered by God. That sharing with God is prayer. It's a communication, and it's something that you can use to ask for the help and the support that you need, to ask for the guidance to come to you. Now, it's often assumed that prayers should have an answer, and we're used to answers in a very specific way. We ask a question and there's a response. But the response to prayer doesn't come necessarily in a flash like that. It sometimes unfolds. It sometimes develops in the life, in the situation around us. And so if we are going to ask for something within a prayer, then we need to have and to develop the sensitivity and patience to become aware of the answer. It might come from somewhere out there. More likely, it will come from somewhere in here, because that's where God lies, within us. But let's not use prayer only to ask for help, only to request that support, although that is important. Let's use prayer to celebrate our lives, to celebrate our experience, to celebrate who we are, by sharing how our life feels, its ups, its downs, our triumphs, our failures, all of those things. We're beginning to change ourselves and to acknowledge what our experience means. It's part of our eternal progress. And eternal progress inevitably will involve things that are exciting and joyful, and things that cause us pain and to feel down. That spectrum of experience is what helps us to grow, what sets our challenges that in striving to meet, we find that we move closer and closer to being who we were meant to be. And I found that by sharing all the good things that happened to me as well, and going to God in prayer and saying, this has happened, it's incredible, it's exciting, it's joyful, it makes me appreciate those things on a much deeper level. We don't always have to go to God with a request. We can go in excitement and joy and triumph and share those things and deepen their meaning within our own lives. Psychologists have found that if we express gratitude, if we consciously identify things each day that we're grateful for, which are positive, our achievements, the things that we've done that we're proud of, then it helps to generate happiness within us. What better than to use prayer to share those kind of things with God? Prayer that can generate happiness. How amazing is that? So I encourage you to think about prayer in your life. And if, like me, you come to the conclusion that God is within you, and that's where you can direct your prayerful intention, then perhaps you know that within you is everything that you need. Everything that you need to cope with your life and the situations that you find yourself in. And that the prayer will help you to feel connected and to find those things that are outside of you that will further help to activate the things within you that help you to keep on coping. Because prayer isn't an action of last resort. It's a primary thing that we can do to enhance our lives, physically, psychologically, emotionally, and of course, spiritually. Because with prayer, we are communicating directly with God. Prayer is there for you, wherever you are, whoever you are. Remember to look within. It's amazing what you'll find. Thank you.